We will control the vertical.
Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I'm talking about a series called Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. Now I have mentioned in the past several times probably that I try and pick what I'm going to watch fairly randomly, the only exceptions being my 3 regular rotations, and sometimes I will pull in a series that's new, very new, because I think it's, you know, in the zeitgeist and it's time to talk about it. However, the rest of the time I have a long list of episode 1 or the earliest possible episode from some sort of anthology series, and I've got them all listed out. And I count them, and I'm still got 60 or so left. Can you believe, of all the ones that and I use the internet to use a random number generator, or I've got a many-sided dice. I sometimes use that and to generate a random number, and then I count down and pick that one. And this one came up. This is Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. This is a British animated series based on a set of book series by an author called Jamie Ricks, who did a lot of the actual writing for the series too, the TV series. There's a number of episodes, 8 in fact, can you believe, that span a lot of time. And I would say from the look and feel, these are really for sort of 8 to 11-year-olds. It's sort of that age range they feel geared at. The one I watched, I don't know about the length of the other series, but this one was about 10 minutes. I think they're fairly short, and I believe the structure is roughly the same for all series, though I think it's got a different sort of different character as like effectively the Crypt Keeper telling the tale in some of the other seasons. Series 1, it's an interesting one. It begins with claymation, a boy approaching a cinema called the Squeam as in squeamish, the Squeam screen, and apparently the book is also sometimes called Grizzly Tales, Cautionary Tales for Lovers of Squeam. How about that? And it's claymation, it's kind of fun, and he goes into the cinema, he buys popcorn, but it turns out it's actually full of cockroaches, but he doesn't seem to notice and starts to eat them. And then there's this old dude running a projector, and he's the narrated by Nigel Planer, probably most famous for being Neil from The Young Ones. Nigel Planer does a lot of narration work, and he does a fairly good, effective job for narrating a kid's tale here. And as I say, it's claymation. Also, this chap's got this spider, which I think is called Spiddleshanks, as a pet. And basically, the kid's on his own in the cinema, and this old guy will give you tell you a little about what's coming. It's a cautionary tale. These are all cautionary tales. There's a touch of the tales of the unexpected about all this, by the way, with a slightly surreal edge. And then he runs the projector, and then the story starts, and that is actually it looks drawn 2D animation. So we go from claymation to a 2D animation. Now, this particular episode, and I'll only really talk about this because I haven't seen any others, it's called The New Nanny. It's effectively this horrible family. I mean, disgustingly have these 2 terrible children, Tristan and Candy, and it's Mr. and Mrs. Frightfully Busy. That's what they're called. They've got this old lady who's a nanny, and they're just horrible. These kids are horrible and tell lies about, and the kids are lies and cheats, and the whole tale is about what happens when you lie. And they basically get kicked out for beating them or something, and she leaves. And then the mother, who's desperate to go back to work or get away from these horrible kids, phones up a nanny agency who send round various nannies who are reasonably pleasant, but get maltreated. The first one they send round happens to be a python. Now, the kids are frightened of this python at first. "Oh, you're not going to eat us?" And they say, "No, I wouldn't do that. I'm a nice person." And at that point, they start abusing her horribly. They pin her down to the in the garden and invite the birds to peck the big worm. They stuff her down the toilet, stuff her up the chimney, and all this. And this is a fairly basic and slightly jerky, intentionally so, 2D animation style. Next nanny is a spider, and the final nanny is an alley. And they treat her the same way. The final nanny is an alligator who just eats them. And when Mr. and Mrs. Frightfully Busy get back, they can't find the children, but they find a couple of eggs, which they immediately decide to boil for their dinner. Big green eggs. And the children hatch and tell them that they've been awfully horrible to their nannies. They're terrified from this alligator thing, and they tell the truth. They say, we shouldn't have been that bad. And at that point, the original nanny knocks on the door and says, are you still looking? Can I come back? And they're saying, yes, because she was quite nice to them. They were just horrible to her. And then they notice she's got something like a bag made of snake skin, which looks a bit like the python, a handbag that's all furry, looks a bit like a spider, and then a big suitcase made of alligator skin that looks like the alligator. So it looks like the nanny, by some sort of magic, was behind it all. It's a kids show. There's really not much to say. It was reasonably okay. I think it would entertain kids. It was gruesome enough, that's for sure. It's very gruesome. And as I say, it's almost like a kid's version of Tales of the Unexpected. It's kind of how it feels. And it was okay. I can't say much more than that. It apparently it first aired on the 4th of January 2000. It looks more like something from the 70s, actually, but probably deliberately so. It looks kind of old-fashioned. And it was reasonably okay. And it's 10 minutes, fine. I'm not really going to say much more than that. It's not a strong recommend or anything like that. I feel that this, perhaps, for me, was maybe just ticking a box of, yep, I've covered that one, rather than any sort of enjoyment. But as I say, it was only 10 minutes, so not much to say more than that. Okay, I think I'll sign off there. But one last question. Is anybody out there?
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to